Thank you so much for joining us. We have a terrific in-studio audience, really excited to get to questions, and it's such a pleasure to welcome to our studios Congressman Will Hurd. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and I just want to state that I think the applause was bigger for you, Julie, than when I take that.
No argument there.
I'll take that. That works for me. All right, let's start. You were a border state congressman. Mm-hmm. We've got a border situation with floating barriers, barbed wire, now a DOJ injunction at Eagle Pass, which you wrote about quite a bit in your book. What would you do? What should we know about this?
Well, so the biggest problem that you have is the fact that the president can't call the governor and talk about how should we be using federal resources and state resources in order to deal with a humanitarian crisis, right? That's the fundamental problem. So don't get into that situation. The specific use of tools, right, is I'm agnostic to, if I'm being frank, right? The way you defend the border, every mile requires a different tool from each other mile. We know that, and we know how to defend it. And so what I would be doing is making sure that the state and the federal government is working together with the Mexican government to say, hey, let's stop these human trafficking, right? 5.5 million people have come into the United States of America illegally since President Biden was in office. This crisis, though, started under Donald Trump, and it was significantly worse under Joe Biden. And this current crisis is not humanitarian. Allowing human smugglers to make about $55 billion. That's with the B. On average, it's about $10,000 to get smuggled into the United States. So 5.5 million that we know of, that's 55 billion. And to give some context to that number, the entire U.S. intelligence budget is $60 billion. So we're not even talking about fentanyl. We're not even talking about these issues. So treat the narco trafficante, the narco traffickers and the human smugglers as a national intelligence priority, and work with the Mexican government and our allies throughout Latin America to dismantle those networks. Two, we have to stop treating everybody that comes to the United States as an asylum seeker. And I'm gonna, since we got a little time, I'm gonna go into this a little bit. So asylum is real, and people should be able to apply to asylum, and many people need asylum. And when you treat everybody like an asylum seeker, it actually hurts the people that need asylum. Asylum requires you to be part of a protected class. Your race, your gender, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your religion. And you have to show that the government is persecuting you because you're part of that protected class. Or the government is not protecting you from a group that is persecuting you by that protected class. Historically, over the last 30 years, only about 40% of people that apply to asylum has actually gotten it. And so you got to streamline this process. You got to work with our host governments in Latin America, primarily, even though illegal immigration is coming from everywhere, to have processing centers to deport more people. And then you need to streamline legal immigration. The last bipartisan piece of legislation that dealt anything with a worker program or such was the USA Act of 2018. Pete Aguilar, Democrat from California, and a tall, dark, and handsome guy from South Texas wrote that. So streamline legal immigration, and that's what I would be doing differently than what this administration or the previous administration did, because this is truly a humanitarian crisis that is within our power. It's within the executive branch to address it. Now, streamlining legal immigration is something that you need Congress involvement in. And then the last point, and I'm sorry I'm going long on this, but this is an important issue. We need to array our foreign aid with some of our national security priorities. It's a fraction of the cost to spend dollars in the Northern Triangle, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, places where historically have been where most illegal immigration has come from, addressing the root causes there. Lack of economic opportunity, extreme poverty, and violence. Having a regional plan over multiple years And that is something that's going to help lessen the amount of illegal immigration that's coming here.
But how do we get beyond the talking points and get to a solution? George W. Bush said the biggest regret he had is not getting a broad bipartisan solution. And the last time we saw that was Ronald Reagan in the White House.
Sure.
So how does each side get off the politics and get to some solutions?
So unfortunately, this is the one issue. All those things that I outline are steps, and this isn't rhetoric. What I outline are specific, credible policies that would work. There's legislation for all of those. A lot of legislation that I've written, but Republicans and Democrats love to use this issue as a political bludgeon against one another. And so how do we get off the X on this problem? The X is the location where something's going down. It starts with an executive branch that does some policies that the majority of Americans support. Right? It starts with that, and then you can build the trust to work on some of the more difficult issues that require congressional activity. And so you can't have a broader conversation about streamlining a guest worker program if you're having millions of people coming through our ports of entry, or a debate about the humanity use of a particular tool. And I would also add, it's not humane to allow people to be sleeping on the concrete in El Paso when it's 115 degrees outside. Mm-hmm. And the pressure that the communities along the border has had to bear over the last 3 years is also unacceptable as well too.
On the campaign, you've been talking about jobs and the economy. Unemployment is at 6.3%, and inflation has eased. Are you going to have to change up those talking points?
No, because I will say this: the amount Americans that are still concerned about their future, that are still worried about whether their kids are going to be able to afford college, whether they're going to have a job. 65% of Americans are worried that a robot may take their job. If you look at the start of this century, since 2000, cost of goods and services have increased 3 times the amount of average wages. So that is a broader trend that despite what happens with inflation or the price of gasoline, this is still a broader problem. And so how do you bring some fiscal sanity to the federal government? How do you make sure that the federal government is spending the way it should? It's wild to me that whether you're in far west Texas talking to some ranchers or in North Country of New Hampshire, when you talk about the federal government and say, how does the federal government spend money? And you say, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? The fact that everybody knows that is the wrong motivations and incentives on how to spend our hard-earned taxpayer dollars. One way you can address that is have multi-year budgets and funding. I would say 4 years. The federal government should get paid. Should try to equip itself and finance itself for 4 years. That's if you save resources in year 1, you could potentially use them in year 2. You can see a better kind of efficiency. So efficiency of government is one step in that kind of financial sanity that we need to help us start addressing the federal deficit, to address the longer term issues that are driving our national debt. And then when it comes to technology, I held the first hearing on AI in Congress. I wrote the first national strategy on artificial intelligence. For the last 2 years, I had served on the board of OpenAI, which is the company that created ChatGPT. I've seen artificial intelligence up close and personal. AI is going to impact every single industry. Jobs are going to get lost, and we have to be ready for this. And this is not a 10-year thing. This is a 2, 3, 4-year thing. And so ultimately, my points on looking at jobs and the economy, there are more issues than just specifically looking at inflation, specifically looking at unemployment. And one of the things that I've learned as I've crisscrossed the country, that unemployment number, is it people being employed in jobs that they enjoy doing. A lot of people are having to hold 2 jobs in order to make end meet. And so while that is reflective and saying that shows low unemployment, is that the kind of job quality and quality of life that we want all Americans to have?
Congressman Will Hurd is here in our studios at SiriusXM with an audience of young people. AI will be impacting this generation, but I have to ask you about one of your opponents, Governor Ron DeSantis, who has said that the anti-vaxxer RFK Jr. would be maybe in a position to be FDA commissioner. He also said that enslaved blacksmiths could use those skills as slavery came to an end in 1865. Is that a winning strategy? What is going on with his campaign?
And he had also hired someone who showed a level of anti-Semitism before being hired, and then he had to get fired because he had an anti-Semitic video. Those are not winning. Those are not winning strategies. And first and foremost, one of the reasons that there's a lack of trust in so many of our institutions, federal government, state government, education, you name it, is because we need serious people in these positions. And a known conspiracy theorist that thinks COVID-19 was put out in the world because a part of the Jewish population was going to be inoculated, saying that that's okay to have someone like that to be a very important position at FDA and CDC is outrageous in my opinion, and it's wrong. The issue on the slavery one as well is really frustrating and scary. I've been saying slavery was not a jobs program, and implying that there was some benefit or upside to slavery is outrageous. And some of the people that were involved in defending that statement, yes, if you read the entire document, it talked about all the negatives and some of the bad things. And if you want to say, hey, despite having zero freedoms, despite having zero rights, despite being treated like property, African Americans in the United States of America contributed to our history. I'm down with that. Right, that's a great message, but that's not what the statement said. So real leadership would say, hey, there's no upside to slavery. I don't want anybody to think that was the case. We're going to sharpen our pencils and we're going to edit that. Guess what? Problem solved. But the fact that his Department of Education doubled down on that statement, that he doubled down on that statement, to me, it's outrageous. Oh, and by the way, do you think that's not going to be a campaign ad in November, right? So and let's even talk about the antagonism towards my friends in the LGBTQ community. I wish Ron DeSantis and even Donald Trump was more focused on, trying to stop war criminals like Vladimir Putin than criticizing my friends in the LGBTQ community. So no, it's not a strategy to win. I wrote in my book, I have a title that says, one of the chapters, it says, "Don't be a jerk." I use a different word, but don't be a jerk, don't be a racist, don't be a homophobe, don't be a misogynist, right?
But very quickly, he says it's on them, on the Florida Department of Education, it's not on him. That's his response.
Lack of leadership. That's a lack of leadership. That is a department that reports to you. The buck stops with you, my man. And so if you're not willing to say, hey, yeah, I didn't write it, but I'm going to fix it, I'd be okay with that response. So the fact that this is still ongoing, and I even think you have a number of people that were involved in the building of this document that have now quit because they're like, the final product was not the thing that they subscribed to. So this is a real easy solution. Slavery is not a jobs program. There was no upside. We're going to fix the language.
I'm Julie Mason with Steve Scully. You're listening to our SiriusXM Town Hall with Congressman Will Hurd. He's a Republican of Texas. We're talking about his 2024 presidential run. I think you're the only Republican candidate talking about affordable housing. A lot of candidates are talking about crime and problems in the cities, but affordable housing would address so many of those problems.
Absolutely. Affordable housing would address crime. It would, we also, you can't talk about these issues without also talking about mental health. And it's not humane to allow people to sleep on the streets. And I've been lucky in my experiences, especially when I was an undercover officer in the CIA overseas, stopping terrorists and preventing nuclear weapons proliferators from bringing dirty bombs into the country and making sure Russians and the Chinese couldn't steal our secrets. But I lived in places that did not have the opportunities that we have. And in the United States of America, we shouldn't have more than 500,000 people any one night living on the streets. And that's where the realities are. There's a number of great programs that are helping people. You know, when I think of affordable housing, there's two. I kind of look at it as two branches. One is, when young people graduate school and start a job in a new city, do they have the ability to find a housing where 5 people don't have to live in a 2-bedroom place, right? That's one part of the affordable housing. That gets into, wages and getting access to good paying jobs. There's another branch of people that have mental health issues, that have addiction issues, and how do you address, and that is preventing them from being able to have an income stream for them to afford some housing. And so those are kind of two branches of this problem that there are ways to address it. But we should be focused on the least of our brothers and sisters that are having these problems, because we live in the greatest country on the planet, and this shouldn't be an issue.
From our SiriusXM studios in Washington, D.C., with my colleague Julie Mason, sitting down with Congressman Will Hurd, Republican candidate for the 2024 presidential nomination, back with our studio audience and more questions after this break.
Laura Coates Show.
Hey, it's Laura. On my show Friday, Congressman Andy Biggs, a Republican out of Arizona's 5th District, stops by the program, along with Adam Frisch, candidate for Colorado's 3rd District, running against incumbent Lauren Boebert, where he narrowly lost in 2022. Shanna Bellows, Maine Secretary of State, will stop by the show, along with Adam Goodman, a Republican strategist and political commentator. All happening Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. East on SiriusXM POTUS and the SXM app.
It's a 90s and 2000s hip-hop and R&B heat wave.
Fly, summer sounds, a mix of massive hits guaranteed to keep your cookout crunk.
And your beach blanket bumping.
The Fly Summer Sounds Mix.
Now playing in the SXM app.
And for all your 90s and 2000s hip-hop and R&B needs, check out SiriusXM Fly, Channel 47.
If you're a trucker looking to take your career to the next level, learn about becoming an owner-operator from the experts at SFI Trucks and Financing. SFI has a huge selection of new and gently used trucks, but they specialize in helping you find the right truck for your business. SFI offers flexibility and support from the beginning stages of someone's interest in a truck and everything in between through the end of their lease. Find out how to make your move and save on a new truck. Visit sfitrucks.com.
Ad paid for by the Sentinel Group. Attention Marines, military personnel, families, and contractors who were stationed at Camp Lejeune. Were you present at Camp Lejeune between August 1953 and December of 1987? You may be entitled to significant compensation. For nearly 34 years, those in the Marine Corps' base Camp Lejeune were exposed to contaminated drinking water, resulting in devastating injuries, including several forms of cancer, adverse birth outcomes, Parkinson's disease, and more. North Carolina's procedural laws have prevented victims from getting the justice they deserve, but passage of the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022 would allow you or a loved one to file lawsuits seeking compensation for illnesses and injuries linked to the toxic water. Call today for your free consultation. 800-860-3973. Let our experienced attorneys fight to get you the compensation you deserve, and you pay nothing unless there's a recovery in your favor. Call 800-860-3973. That's 800-860-3973. Again, 800-860-3973.
Now, back with the SiriusXM Town Hall with former Congressman Will Hurd, Republican of Texas, on his 2024 presidential run on POTUS, SiriusXM 124.
I'm Julie Mason with Steve Scully. You're listening to our SiriusXM Town Hall. Former Congressman Will Hurd is a Republican of Texas. He is running for president. Question from a listener, really interesting one, I think, especially given your background in intelligence. When you're out on the campaign trail, how do you answer questions from voters about January 6th, the 2020 election, the deep state, etc.?
Sure.
People who truly believe maybe counterfactual
Yeah.
narratives about these events.
So, three specific issues there, right? And I will say, since the events of January 6th, when I would be out at events and speaking, I call it an insurrection because that's what it was. People trying to topple the government. And people would come up to me and be like, "Will, it wasn't an insurrection." I say, "Well, what do you say it was?" They're like, "It was a tour." And I would explain and tell them, here's all the things to watch. Here's what, I've given plenty of tours of the Capitol, all this stuff, right? After the January 6th hearings, when people would criticize the verb that I would use or the adjective I would use to describe what happened on January 6th, and I said, what do you do? What do you call it? They said they'd call it a riot. So that's better than a tour, right? Yeah. And so for me, it's real simple. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. It wasn't taken from him. He lost it because he failed to grow the Republican brand to the three largest growing groups of voters: women with a college degree in the suburbs, black and brown communities, and folks under the age of 35. That's why he lost. The 2020 election was one of the safest and fairest elections in our history of our government. And so I'm just clear about that. And most people, when they ask, it stops there. Now, the broader issue of the deep state gets a little tricky, and a lot of people want to focus on the intelligence community, asking me specifically because I come from that. And yes, there have been some retired senior leaders of the intelligence communities that I think have made mistakes, right? That have, after being out of office, have gone on TV and made some claims as if they had access to, information. And that erodes trust within our institutions. And I've told those people that your gut is not a source, okay? Let's get back to CIA 101. Your gut is not a source.
I was going to say, didn't you learn that in
you
the
learned
service?
that.
Yeah.
And so I try to separate some of the leadership from these organizations to the rank and file members. I have my own frustrations with the FBI. I think the FBI has made some mistakes and have been overly aggressive. But the rank and file people in the FBI and the CIA are putting themselves in harm's way every single day in order to keep us safe. And so I try to explain that and then talk about that's why we need a chief executive that you can trust. You need a chief executive that's going to tell you the truth. You need a chief executive that understands these institutions and their value to the American public. And so that's how I answer those questions and again, I enjoy answering those questions because we need, we have to get beyond this fighting about and complaining about what happened in the past. The United States of America is in a new Cold War with the Chinese government. And the Chinese government is trying to surpass us as a global superpower. That's not my opinion. That is what the Chinese government has said about themselves in English since at least 2015. And let me be clear. I always say the Chinese government, because the beef is not with the Chinese people. Mm-hmm. It's not with Chinese culture. It's definitely not with Chinese Americans. Some of the crap that my brothers and sisters in the Asian American community has had to deal with since COVID and racism focus on them is unacceptable, and we should stop it all. But we got to be clear-eyed about who our adversary is. That's the Chinese government. And so if we're constantly litigating and crying about the past, we're not going to be able to do the things that we need to do in order to keep our position that has afforded us the greatest quality of life the world has ever seen. And so that's why we have to be able, and I think the best way to do this is to beat Donald Trump in a primary and to make sure that we're not having to deal with him in the future.
So how do you do that? How do you beat Donald Trump?
Sure. It's not rocket science. You ID your voters and you turn them out. This is the lesson I learned when I lost my first election in 2009. I won the primary, but I lost the runoff because I failed to ID my voters, turn them out. And when you look at even the Republican primary electorate, there are more people that dislike Donald Trump than like him. And yes, all the polling shows his lead, and Donald Trump talks about his lead every chance he can get. But that polling does not reflect. I would have hoped we would have learned since 2016 that these national polling reflect a instance in time. When you start doing voter ID is where you call hundreds of thousands of people, not just 800, and you say, where are you, who are you going to vote for? That starts looking a little bit different. And so there are more people that dislike Donald Trump than do. 7 out of 10 Americans do not want to see Joe Biden on the ballot. 6 out of 10 Americans do not want to see Donald Trump on the ballot. So we have to activate that group of people.
So Mitt Romney is saying by February 26th, make it a two-person race. Everyone else should get out of the race. Do you abide by that? Do you agree with him?
I don't know about the February 26th date, but I think Governor Chris Sununu from New Hampshire probably said it best. It's by like the winter time. If there's no pathway to victory, then there needs to be some consolidation of the candidates, and I ascribe to that, and I think that is a logical place. But guess what? We need a candidate who's not afraid to criticize Donald Trump. You don't win. Yes, I've been an elected official. I've run many races. I'm not a political scientist, but I don't think in any political science books they tell you one way to beat your opponent is to kiss his butt, right? and so we need to have people that are not afraid to criticize Donald Trump, but are also willing to articulate a vision for the future.
So who is the Will Hurd voter? What's your constituency?
A Will Hurd voter is someone who is, one, frustrated with the direction the Democratic Party is going. Someone is frustrated with the direction the Republican Party is going. It is people that recognize that way more unites us than divides us as the country, and accepts and understands that we're better together. It is a person that recognizes our role in the world matters because it has afforded us a quality of life since World War II that has been the envy of the world. And a Will Hurd voter is also someone who is somewhat suspicious of technology, right? But they recognize it's something that we got to take advantage of before it takes advantage of us.
We have a lot of questions from the audience here, so we will go to a short break. The audience will applaud Will Hurd here in the SiriusXM studios. Along with the great Julie Mason, I'm Steve Scully, a special town hall with one of the Republican presidential candidates. We're back in a moment.
SiriusXM's Today Show Radio presents The Acceleration Hour with Jake Ward.
Life is moving fast. Let's get you caught up. Hi, I'm Jake Ward, technology correspondent for NBC News. This summer, we have your crash course in what's new and what's next in the world of tech. From people who worked inside the world's biggest companies and now want you to know what they're planning, to experts trying to shape tech before it shapes all of us, we're going to get you ready for the future.
The Acceleration Hour with Jake Ward. Fridays on Today Show Radio, channel 108, and on the SXM app.
It's time for Ask Dr. Marty. Brought to you by Dr. Marty's Pets, Nature's Blend. Called a miracle worker by Forbes magazine, veterinarian Dr. Marty has been helping dogs thrive for nearly 50 years. Celebrities and dog parents fly in from all over the world to see him. And now he's assisting dog parents everywhere by answering your questions. Here he is, Dr. Marty.
Hi, everyone. This week's question comes from Carl S. from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Why does my dog sit on my feet? I love this question because it's all about the incredible bond you share with your dog. When your dog sits on your feet or leans against your legs, it's their way of saying, I feel safe and secure with you. It's their way of giving you a big old hug. Now, I totally understand that sometimes you might be doing something around the house and need to keep moving. So if you find yourself in that situation and your dog is getting cozy on your feet, give your pup a few gentle scratches in their favorite spots to hold them over. This way, you're acknowledging them and giving them affection and attention before you continue on with your tasks. Then, when you're done with whatever you're doing, you can cuddle up and show them how much you love them. So cherish those foot-sitting moments, acknowledge them with some ear scratches, and keep encouraging your dog to communicate with you, because it's clearly one of your dog's favorite ways of telling you they love you. Email me your dog questions at marty@drmartypets.com, and perhaps I'll answer your question next week. I can't wait to hear from you.
A Rottweiler named Whiskey, with hours to live, brought back to full health. A terrier named Snoopy, paralyzed in all 4 legs, who ran and played again within months. These dogs are known as Marty's Miracles. Dogs brought back to health by Dr. Marty Goldstein.
I've helped countless dogs thrive with one simple concept. Your dog needs a high-meat diet similar to what their ancestors ate in the wild.
Called the Miracle Worker by Forbes magazine, he's now created a premium dog food for you called Nature's Blend. It's the easiest way to support your dog's easy digestion, nourished skin, playful energy, and most importantly, their healthy, full life. For a limited time, save up to 54% off Nature's Blend and get free premium dog treats. Go to drmartypets.com/POTUS or text POTUS to 511-511. Text POTUS to 511-511.
I'm so confident your dog will love it. Your order is backed with a 90-day guarantee.
All pets are unique. Your pet's results can and will vary. Message and data rates may apply.
Now, back with the SiriusXM Town Hall with former Congressman Will Hurd, Republican of Texas, on his 2024 presidential run on POTUS, SiriusXM 124.
I'm Julie Mason with Steve Scully. You're listening to our SiriusXM Town Hall. Former Congressman Will Hurd is a Republican of Texas. We're talking about his 2024 presidential run. We've got some terrific questions from the audience. Can we hear from Terry? Is Terry here?
And you like the studio audience, don't you?
Oh, yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Like I said, I love this. Hey, Terry. Thanks for being
Congressman Terry Hauser with the National Federation of Republican Women. It's good to see you again. Our 65,000 grassroots women across the country have been working on 3 issues that I'd like you to touch on briefly. I think you've already touched a little on human trafficking. The second is parental rights and educational opportunities. And the third is the Supreme Court, specifically Senator Cruz's Keep 9 Amendment, which would prevent court packing by fixing the number of justices at 9. Could you comment on those?
Sure, I'll take those in reverse order. You know, keeping the Supreme Court as is makes the most sense. I don't think there's any interest in growing it in order to take advantage of the checks and balances that we have because when Democrats want to push on this, it's because they failed to get enough votes at the ballot box, and so they want other ways to try to achieve things. So I think keeping it at 9 makes a whole lot of sense. The issue on trafficking, like the fact that in 2023 that we basically still there's still sex slavery happening in the world is unacceptable, and the fact that the United States play a role in that, I think this is one of the broader issue of smuggling should become a national intelligence priority. And when I say that, it's very specific, and not to get too wonky on this, there's a thing called the NIPIF, the National Intelligence Priority Framework, and that is how the federal government says, hey, here's all the things that we're going to have the CIA, the NSA, all these different groups focus on. Smuggling and sexual trafficking should be significantly higher on that list. And the second part of the 3-part question was parental choice. Yeah, look, I actually believe in local control, and that means pushing decisions down to the lowest possible place, and that's ultimately to the parents, right? And so we should be making sure that we're empowering people to do that, and that's on every level. If you believe in local control, then you can't be trying to consolidate power in the executive branch. If you believe in local control, you also shouldn't be trying to consolidate power within our governor's offices, right? It's about pushing this down, and when it comes to educating our kids, our parents know the best. So making sure parents have that control is something I'm supportive of. And when it comes to education too, look, I'm a proud product of Texas public schools. And I still talk to a lot of my teachers when I was in high school with. But here's having choice in our school system is important, and Texas has completed a longitudinal study about the choice issue that, especially when it comes to black and brown kids in charter schools. The achievement gap is eliminated with their white counterparts. That we should be opening that, but also we should making sure public schools have to get to abide by the same rules that charter schools do, right? Let's make it open and have a competition. So because we have income inequality, because we have education inequality, and making sure our kids are prepared for jobs that don't exist today is something that's important.
So what was Will Hurd like in high school? The jock, the nerd?
Total nerd.
No, yeah, well, look, okay. Anne Marie Johnson wrote in my yearbook. She goes, "If I could marry anybody, it'd be Will Hurd, because my life would never be boring." Thank you, Mama J, for that. No, look. So I played basketball, right? I was a basketball player, but I was also on the Junior Engineering and Technical Society.
Of course.
So I was well-rounded. I like to say I was well-rounded, and my wife laughs now.
Yeah, you have a new title. Husband.
I do, husband. Yeah,
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm in Q3 of marriage. The love fund is up and to the right.
Noted.
And it's been great. But she laughs because she's found some stuff that I've written when I was in high school and early college, and she's like, "Well, you sound exactly the same as you do now." So, but yeah, John Marshall Rams, ram 'em.
There you go.
All right, let's hear from James.
Thank you, Congressman. I am a federal retiree, and the question that I had was, would you please comment on the public's perception that the federal bureaucracy is protecting Joe and Hunter Biden?
Yeah, look, one of the things that I think has been frustrating is the attacks on the bureaucracy, right? And what I have learned from being associated with the federal, with national security for 22 years, is the men and women that work in government are doing it because they want to help their country. And the fact that will there be some bad apples every once in a while? Absolutely, and we should root those out and be stern in any kind of response to bad behavior, right? The fact that back in the 2016 election, there was a DOJ lawyer that doctored an email from the CIA that went to, I think it was an FBI lawyer that doctored an email that came from the CIA to DOJ. The fact that that person's not in jail, to me, is outrageous, because if I would have done something like that, we all know what the consequences would be. So we can't, when that negative actions happen, we can't paint a brush on everyone. I think the unraveling of the Hunter Biden, what's it called? The plea deal, right? There's something interesting there, but let's pursue the facts. We should allow facts to make sure we do this. But ultimately, what I would always tell some of my colleagues, and I criticized government, I criticized Congress a lot, but if those that are in it are not defending it, right, or talking about how you can do things better, then shame on you, right? Because again, at the core, the men and women that serve in the government are doing so because they love their country.
But some of your former colleagues, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, now the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, talking about an impeachment inquiry. Mm-hmm. Your reaction?
Well, first and foremost, I think they should be focused on uncovering the truth and details of what's happening in the known cases dealing with Hunter Biden. For me, impeachment, my standard for impeachment has always been clear. It's a violation of the law, a clear violation of the law. And so, where is that coming? And so, again, focus on facts. Not emotion. I also think that impeachment, and I said this in the first impeachment of Donald Trump, I guess that was 2017, 2018, that impeachment should not be a political process. And when, we shouldn't be trying to have every president impeached. This happened with President Obama. This happened, obviously, with Donald Trump. And so this is not, I think, ultimately a winning message in November. And the thing that I'm frustrated by as a Republican is it's been 20 years since a Republican has won the national popular election.
2004, last time.
That's right. And that doesn't have to be the case. And the reason that has happened is that we are not talking about the issues that the American people want us to talk about.
Let's hear from Alex. Alex Lozcano.
Thank you, Congressman. I work in the private sector, and I'm a local D.C. resident. And my question is very general. When do you know the left has gone too far?
When do you know the left has gone too far? Well, look, I think there's been a number of examples. Everything from defund the police is probably the one that first comes to my mind. The open borders policy that we're seeing that has led to the 5.5 million people coming into office illegally. I think that's gone too far. The fact that they're even talking about negotiating a new deal with Iran is pretty outrageous. Is pretty outrageous to me. The unwillingness to work on real immigration reform. I always remind people that President Obama had the chance when he had all branches of government. He couldn't pass immigration reform. There's legislation that's sitting in the hopper right now that Joe Biden is not willing to bring up. And so these are just some of the examples to me where I think the broader left or the policies of this government have gone too far.
Finish this sentence. The state of our democracy today is what?
Fragile. Democracy is not a fait accompli. 247 years ago, when we started this experiment, it was called an experiment because democracy hadn't existed on this planet in about 2,000 years. The last one was Julius Caesar, and he screwed that up when he became emperor. And so nobody thought this was going to work. I think it was 66 years for another democracy to exist on planet Earth. That was Switzerland. There's only 14 countries that have been in democracy more than 100 years. And so democracy has always been, is currently, and will always be fragile. And we have to work at this. And we don't have to do the level of effort that our fathers and mothers did. We're not having to fight on the fields of Lexington. We're not having to pitch battles in Gettysburg. We're not having to march in Selma and Jackson, or we're not having to be involved in hand-to-hand combat in the mountains of Mazar-e-Sharif. All it requires of us is to get up and vote. Only 23% of Americans vote in a primary. That's the problem, and why we have allowed the lunatic fringe on both sides to take advantage of our political debate. And if more people, those 77% of Americans actually showed up in primaries where there's much better options than what we have in a general election, then our democracy would be strong. But a democracy is always fragile, and but we can ensure that this exists for another 247 years.
Just a few more minutes. Naveen from the University of Florida has a question. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead.
Thank you, Congressman. My name is Naveen Siddiqui, and I'm a rising sophomore at the University of Florida.
Awesome. What are you studying?
Economics and math.
Very cool. That's very cool.
I would like to know if you think industrial policy should continue to make a comeback given the recent CHIPS and Science Act under President Biden. You clearly have a detailed passion for AI and tech innovation. So how do you see yourself keeping these priorities while maintaining fiscally conservative?
Sure. A great question. And, industrial policy is a tricky word up here in Washington, D.C. And what does it mean? A authoritarian government can do it easier because they can move all factors of production in one direction. I'm obviously not advocating for that. But I think the federal government has a role in talking about what are the long-term priorities and how do we use our national labs in order to innovate. One of the things that's been missing in all these debates about the CHIPS Act and where we are with TSMC. This is the Taiwanese company that's responsible for 60% of advanced manufacturing of advanced semiconductors. The real bottleneck is a Dutch company called ASML. ASML is a tooling company. They basically make the machines that lay the plasma on the semiconductor, and they're the only ones that do it. Guess what? All their technology was developed in the national labs right here in the United States of America. And we gave it to other people. That's just crazy. So when it comes to quantum computing, when it comes to artificial general intelligence, when it comes to synthetic biology, the federal government can have a role in some of the basic science and math that goes into these issues, but also in adopting some of these technologies. And so by being a leader there, it's setting a tone of the direction of where things can be. And so you can call, I don't know if you would call that industrial policy, but it is articulating the places we should be going, and then also making sure that we're cooperating with the private sector and getting and achieving some of these issues. In this new Cold War with China, I talk about the only way we're going to beat an adversary that's 4 times our size. You know, we all have seen that stat that there are more kids in honors classes in China than there are all kids in the United States of America, right? In order to beat that, the federal government and the public and the private sector are going to have to cooperate in a way that we haven't seen.
Let's hear from Melissa Chan, all the way from UC Berkeley.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you for being here with us. My question is, as a former representative for a primarily Latino district, what are your thoughts about the decisions on affirmative action?
Sure. Not only being a former representative of a Latino district, but being a black Republican, right? So, regardless of whether affirmative action has been used or not, we are failing our black and brown kids in places like California and Texas. The fact that there's not a reflection of, you know, kids that are graduating high school, that those same percentages should hold. If we're doing things right, and if everybody's getting equal opportunity, we should see that reflecting in the people that are in schools. The decision did not say race cannot be a factor in decision. You can bring it up in the questions you get asked by folks. So the broader question for me is, how are we making sure that we're doing things in the high school level to make sure that kids from all communities have the same opportunities in places in our institutions of higher learning? That gets back to the issue I was talking about earlier about education and income inequalities, because of education inequality, and having more choice there can reflect that particular issue.
Congressman, there is a real concern about the